Okay, alright guys, this is BrothersJacksonVideos. The video today is just a little bit different. This is actually a selection of stories submitted to me by my friends personally. I really hope you enjoy it, something a little bit different, and every one of these stories is completely unique and never been heard before. So, sit back, relax and enjoy. This is a little story about a strange occurrence that has happened to me twice and has also happened to a friend as well, and I feel it's a bit too weird to just be a coincidence. So first, we have to go back to the early 2000s, maybe 2001, when I was about 9 or 10 years old. It was a warm night in September and I went out for a walk with my little bro at about 9 PM. It was quite dark and the skies were cloudless. We were just walking past our local park when my brother, who was probably 7 or 8 at the time, pointed to the sky behind me. He had been running in front of me and turned around to face me. I also turned and noticed a light in the sky that appeared to look like a bright white star. At this time during my childhood, I was really interested in my astronomy and had star maps and books relating to similar subjects. I also had a telescope that I frequently used with my dad and, well, this light didn't match the location of stars or planets that I knew of. Being so young, it was difficult to tell the size of this thing, but it certainly wasn't small. Judging by its approximate distance and my perspective, it actually seemed to be quite large. We both stood transfixed, staring at this light when it gradually began to turn orange and glow, similar to a streetlight. It stayed in the sky for another few minutes before all of a sudden, when it unnaturally zipped into the sky and disappeared, leaving a streak of blinding white light that looked a bit like lightning without the purple tinge, leaving the sky an empty canvas apart from the stars that were dotted about. Over time, my memories didn't stand the test of time, and this particular memory almost became forgotten. I was so young when it happened, and it just became one of those strange thoughts that popped into my head once or twice over the next 15 years that I just put down to being something odd that I couldn't explain because of my youth. My brother, even now, doesn't remember seeing the light at all, and my parents never knew because we both didn't tell them. Fast forward now, and it's sometime in the 2010s. I was talking to one of my friends when the topic of UFOs came up. We were mainly discussing the validity of government cover-ups, hoaxes, and the possibility of advanced technologies and alien life when my friend made the matter a whole lot more personal by asking if I'd ever seen a UFO. I was taken aback, and like I say, with the previous incident happening so long ago, it didn't even pop into my mind, and I replied with a no before asking if he had. That's when he told me one of the creepiest things I've ever been told up until this point. He said yes. I asked him to elaborate, and that's when things got weirder. He said he had been walking home from our local town, where he worked at the time. It was dark and late, and most of the roads were deserted when he claimed to notice a bright white light hovering over the houses near where he was walking. He told me he just thought it was a Chinese lantern as it was early January, but then he said he realised that it wasn't moving. It was perfectly still in the night sky. He admitted to me that he stopped walking and gazed momentarily at it, but it must have been a star or something. He continued walking, watching the object in the sky closely when he tells me that all of a sudden it just shot off into the sky, leaving a white tail behind as it disappeared. I was freaked out to say the least and decided not to tell my friend of my experience just yet, as I didn't want to get us both overly excited. I also thought I would never see this light again anyway. You're going to need to bear with me here because things get even weirder. I was speaking to my older brother close to this time. He moved out when I was younger, so I only see him now and again. So anyway, I'm talking to him and he knows I have an interest in the paranormal, the unexplained, the supernatural, and UFOs, and as such, he tells me a little story of something that happened to him and a few of his friends when they went up to Werneth Low. Werneth Low is basically a massive hill where, at the peak, you can see over all of Manchester, including where we live. He said they were up there just to have a bit of a chill and relax. The scenes are stunning up there and I don't blame them. They were just sat on a field, talking, chilling, laughing and drinking when my brother claims that he noticed a big orange light moving erratically over the city with a smaller orange ball of light orbiting it as it moved. He claimed the lights were way high up, higher than they were at the top of this hill. The big ball of orange light then proceeded to float higher up and, with its companion ball, disappeared as it, in my brother's words, blasted off. My brother admitted to me that it could have been a plane, shooting star or satellite because he wasn't really interested in all that and didn't know what was what. Yet, I found his story compelling because he wouldn't go to the effort to make this up. A couple of years go by again and I've now got a DSLR. It has a slow shutter speed which is nice for taking pictures of stars and stuff, and I use it often to photograph the night sky. About a week after getting my camera, I was taking pictures of the night sky, trying to snap stars and get clear images of the moon. It was pretty uneventful, and when I got home I was looking through the new pictures I had taken. I gasped as I noticed a bright orange star in the corner of two of the pictures, and then, in the third, it was gone. After enhancing the pictures by zooming in and brightening it slightly, I noticed that it was a bright orange ball with two smaller orange balls orbiting it, just like my brother had reported seeing to me a couple of years earlier, and in the same orange shade as I had seen when I was a child. The strangest thing about all this is that the two pictures were taken 15 seconds apart and the main orange light, it didn't move. I tried to debunk or explain the picture, but that cancels out the possibility of it being a satellite or any known aircraft, and to make it even weirder, if you look at the bottom right, you can see a satellite that has moved from right to left. Take a look. I posted the pictures online asking for any explanation, and no one could give me any idea as to what it was, so, for all intents and purposes, it is a UFO. What do you think it is? Any answers would be greatly helpful, and I'm open to anything. Okay, so this is something that happened to me when I was a little boy, and though a few close friends know of this incident because I told them, nobody else does, and nowadays I'm usually reluctant to share this with people. So I was young, I'm not sure how young, maybe as young as 7 or 8, and this was during that phase of my life where I wanted to look cool by hanging around with my older brother and his friends. Not to sound like the plot to a Stephen King novel or anything, but my brother was in a big group of 12-year-olds who had a base just off a set of old abandoned train tracks near where we lived. It was an old derelict factory that was pretty much isolated in a small wooded area about half a mile down the tracks. One day, I was out and I couldn't find my brother or any of his friends anywhere, and I thought they must all be at the base. Being a fucking stupid little kid, I broke onto the train tracks, still dumb. even if they are abandoned, and walked down the overgrown and rusting tracks for the half-mile. I reached that point at which I needed to exit the tracks, and I walked through the little wooded area and onto the factory grounds. And I'd been here before, but always with my brother and never alone. Vines grew in all sorts of contorted shapes up the flaky stone walls, and one half of the roof had caved in, probably due to the damp. The concrete paving had a multitude of cracks on it, and weeds sprouted from the soil below. It looked like some sort of post-apocalyptic scene. I walked around the factory for a while, bellowing my bro's name and being followed by the sound of water droplets hitting the ground. Branches had begun to grow through the broken windows and the open ceiling like arms trying to grab at me, and the lighting made it so that some of the areas were totally dark. I was walking around and felt really uneasy. It was the first time in my life I'd ever had that sixth sense. The sense that I was being watched by someone. Or something. I must have been there half an hour altogether and couldn't find my brother or any of his mates. I decided to leave and didn't think much of anything. I was just trying to think of where else my brother might be. As I was coming out of the woods, it started to rain and I began to make my way up the tracks back towards home. I climbed back onto the old platform, and to get off the tracks, you have to walk up a flight of steep steel stairs and then climb over a locked gate which takes you out onto a road where a bridge crosses over the old tracks. I'm at the top of the steps when I turn around and look out across the tracks. That's when I see this shape. It was a shadow. The shadow of a person. A little boy judging by size, but I couldn't make out any details because it was just a shadow. Way off in the distance. Black against the tracks. Just slowly skipping towards me. I was young and this terrified me, so I just ran the fuck home as fast as I could and tried to forget about it, but struggled. My brother came home a few hours after I got in and I asked where he was and that I had been looking for him. He told me that he had been at his mate Harry's house. They weren't at the base. In fact, my brother admitted he was trying to get away from me. I still have no explanation for what I saw and continued to go to the factory with my brother, but I never saw anything like that, and as I'm aware, neither has my brother or any of his friends. When we were kids, we went to Disney World in Florida. Being from the UK, it was a massive shock to us and was super exciting as well. We had an amazing time whilst we were there. Me, my two brothers and my sister were practically inseparable. Whilst there, I noticed one of my brothers, Sean, who was the youngest of us all, had begun talking to himself. At first I just ignored it, but after it continued to happen, I caved and asked him who it was he was talking to. He told me that it was his imaginary friend. Okay, nothing wrong with that. Plenty of kids make up imaginary friends and stuff, but I had never had one before and my childhood curiosity piqued. What does it look like? I remember asking him one evening when we were out for a meal. I must admit, even being as young as I was, I understood the creep factor of what he said next, and it's likely I'll never forget his response. My brother replied in an almost happy tone. He looks just like me, but pale. I nearly choked on my drink, but didn't tell my brother there was anything wrong about that because I didn't want to upset him. I tried to forget about it too, and I did. Being a child at Disney World means even the most important of information can be forgotten. The rest of our trip went by without incident and Sean was his normal happy self and nothing seemed amiss. A bit later, after the summer holidays when we had just started back at school, I came home from school and as I was walking up the stairs, I could see into the living room and noticed my brother standing in front of the TV as if he was watching something, but there was nothing on the screen. My brother was facing away from me and I shouted down to him, asking what he was doing. He didn't respond at all, and I assumed he might have had a bad day at school and just left it at that, making my way up the stairs. My other brother and my sister weren't home yet, meaning I was the second home, so I was shocked to see Sean stood in our shared bedroom, in the exact same position as I'd seen him downstairs, watching James and the Giant Peach on our TV in the bedroom. My mouth hung open as I proceeded to ask how the heck he got upstairs so fast. Never mind so fast, how he got upstairs at all without passing me. He looked at me confused before saying, "I have no idea what you're talking about. I've been stood here for about an hour. I didn't go to school today. I've been feeling ill." I didn't even respond. I ran downstairs to investigate. The house was empty. Over the next couple of years, my brother began to grow out of his imaginary friend phase, though not without a few more creepy experiences. None were more terrifying than that, but creepy nonetheless. I knew about doppelgangers, even at the time. I'm not entirely sure what manifested in the living room that day, but I swear to you now, I have no doubt in my mind that it was my brother that I saw. Yet, he had been upstairs all afternoon. Back when I was a kid, I used to live in a block of flats with my mum. Just down the road from our flats was this grim old abandoned pub we all used to chill in when we were prepubescent arseholes who thought it was cool to break into places. The basement of this old pub was flooded and had been for as long as me and my mates had been going. The actual pub space was, well, just empty except for the skeletal bar and kitchen, and upstairs had living quarters. 8 really small bedrooms, 4 on each side, running up this corridor. At the end of the corridor, there used to be a window, but it was heavily boarded up now, and so the corridor was pitch black other than the sliver of light that leaked out from under the last bedroom door on the left. That door led to the only way out of the pub through a broken window and onto the porch. To get in wasn't much easier. You had to lift the lip of an old steel shutter and throw yourself under before it came hurtling back down. This one day, I went looking for my friends. It was a Saturday or Sunday because I was off school and my mum was out shopping with her sister. Once I entered the pub, I began looking around the back of the bar, the kitchen, and even the old broom closets. Not there. I headed upstairs, assuming they were smoking in one of the old bedrooms. As I reached the top of the stairs, I slowed slightly as it's pitch black in the corridor. Then I heard the old basement door open and footsteps walk slowly across the pub floor. It could have been my mates, yet I knew the basement was flooded, so why would they be down there? My head was screaming at me not to call out for them. I tried craning my head, but the basement door was just out of my field of vision, round the corner. I stood froze before I heard the footsteps come back this way. Somehow, I knew it wasn't my friends, and I thought for sure I was going to die, and then I heard the basement door creak shut. I didn't move. I was terrified and immediately decided I was just going to leave, but then a second revelation occurred. In the bedroom, right at the end of the corridor, on the right, the one opposite the exit window, I could hear noises. Noises as if someone was trying to be quiet but was failing. I reached in my hoodie pocket and pulled out a penknife I always kept on me for safety and slowly edged towards the door. As I was walking, I managed to step on a creaky floorboard and suddenly all noise from the right side room stopped. Silence. I crept as slowly as I could. My intention was to open the door on the right in case my dickhead mates were pranking me, but as I got closer, the noises abruptly started up again, getting louder and louder. I stopped trying to be quiet myself and sprinted to the end of the corridor, into the left side room, and jumped out the window, grazing my knee as I jumped. I didn't stop there and ran all the way up the road to my flat, scared I was being followed. My friends later promised me they weren't there and that they had gone to the park, and suddenly the idea of ghosts were being thrown about. We decided to go back and investigate for ghosts and search the rooms. We did, and we found old clothes, sleeping bags, empty crisp packets, and human shit in the corner of the rooms. There were used needles all over the floor, and in one room, what looked like blood splatter on the wall. It was clear squatters or homeless people were staying here, and we just booked it out of there. After that, we never went back to the old pub, and it was turned into a convenience store a few years later. What my gran always used to tell me still rings true to this day. Don't fear the dead, fear the living. Growing up in my old house, I always knew that my house was haunted. Strange events would always revolve around me specifically, and I always used to wish I could grow into a man and think it was just the overactive imagination of a child. However, my mum and dad later admitted to me that they too heard and saw the things I did. Nevertheless, I put up with it and was relieved to find out that in my last year of primary school, so when I was around 12, we were moving house a couple of doors down on our street. The first night there after moving in was super chilled and was one of the most relaxing nights I ever remembered having. I never felt unsafe or as if there were any ominous energies. I felt normal. The majority of the first year of us living there was like this. I never thought anything bad was going to happen, and my experiences at the previous house began to fade into the abyss of memories. That all changed around the end of summer. Me and my younger brother shared a room. My older brother had his own, and so did my mum and dad. We would all be in bed, and both me and my younger brother would hear odd noises downstairs. It was as if furniture was being slid across a laminate flooring. However, when we went downstairs in the morning, everything was normal. Other strange things began happening around Halloween. Ball-bearing pellets used in BB guns I had at the time would drop on the floor next to me and bounce wherever I was in the house. At first I thought they were just embedded in my shoe where I had perhaps stood on them, but on countless occasions me, and a number of family members, friends, and other witnesses saw these ball bearings fall from the ceiling. About 5 months later, and my mum and dad had gone to my grandparents' house and I was at home alone. I invited 2 of my friends around and we were all stood in the dining room located at the back of the house. We were about to start filming a movie on an old shitty camcorder I had because, well, that's what we used to do for fun. Me and one of my mates were stood next to each other, and my other mate was stood on the other side of the table, facing away from us. From the corner of the room, next to where me and my mate were stood, we heard a little boy's voice call out the name of my friend, who was on the other side of the table. He turned around and asked, "What?" And me and my mate were just stood looking at him, the fear of God in our eyes. "That wasn't us," I said. "Ha ha ha," he laughed sarcastically back at us. "No, serious. There was no one stood in the corner and that made it even creepier." My mate was having none of it and began arguing with us. The argument came to a head and my friend, whose name was Whispered, shouted out, "Is there anyone here in this house who is trying to fuck with me?" He said it in a macho voice as if he was trying to look cool. That look was wiped clean off his face when the dog bed that was located in the corner that the disembodied voice emanated from earlier slid across the room and stopped at our feet. There was a moment of silent shock, then my two mates screamed at the top of their lungs. They pretty much ran straight out of my house and were too scared to ever come back in again. This final incident actually occurred on Halloween night. My mum and dad had gone to the shop to get some sweets for the local trick-or-treaters before they all came knocking, and me and my two brothers were left alone to get ready for our own trick-or-treating. Me and my younger brother went upstairs to look for our masks from the year before. Talk about last minute. And we go into the room we share. My brother climbs on the top bunk and sits there whilst I haul old storage boxes out from under the bed. Now I pull this first box out when I'm suddenly hit in the face with a soft toy duck. I mean, it hit me so hard, it pinged off my face and flew under the bed. I looked at my brother, who was in disbelief. We kept that teddy on top of our cupboard on the other side of the room. If it had just fell, it would have landed a foot or so away from me, but it didn't. It hit me square in the face, with some power too. I edged towards the bed and slowly lifted the duvet that was now hanging over the bed. I looked under and the duck teddy was spinning in circles. Just spinning. There was no draft strong enough to move it like that and no external force moving it. I pulled my head out from under the bed and looked at my brother. He must have calmed down a bit as he looked at me and said, "Yo man, my teddy just shot at you." I asked if he was sure it didn't fall. He shook his head and told me that it slid to the edge of the cupboard, lifted up, and then shot at me, like it had been thrown. He had the perfect view of it as well, and I felt my stomach tighten. We both stood there for a moment, too terrified to move, when the single most terrifying thing of my entire life happened. Something so terrifying, it cannot be passed off as a draft or the sounds of an old house. From right behind me, I heard a low, rumbling, demonic growl that encompassed my ear. My brother heard it too, and I leapt over the box on the floor and ran into my mum and dad's room. My brother was on the landing and just ran in there with us, maybe thinking we were playing a game. We locked ourselves in the room as it was the only door with a lock and waited for my mum and dad to come home. After this event, things slowly began to subside. There was the odd incident here or there, but nothing quite so terrifying. We ended up moving again anyway, a few years after that, and I feel like I attract the paranormal in some way or another, as creepy incidents of the unexplained always seem to follow me. Back in the day, when I was much younger and when I was a mischievous bastard, me and my friends would tag along and hang around my brother and his older group of mates. Now, right near our house was an old mill dating back to the Industrial Revolution, and it was big. It had something like 9 or 10 floors. The lower levels had been rented out as shops, cafes and showrooms, but a lot of the upper levels were derelict and in various states of decay. On one of the upper floors, there was a room dating back to the early 70s that had been a washroom for local residents and workers. We were sat in the room talking, chilling and smoking like the rebellious little twats we were. There was easily 12 of us and we were all causing a bit of a ruckus and being little shits when there was a slapping sound from the middle of the room. We all glanced over to where it had come from. There was nothing there. As we were all looking, the slap came again. We all agreed that we didn't see anything that could have made the noise. Then it came one last time. It sounded as though bare wet feet were taking single steps. We all looked at each other as if to say, "What the fuck?" when from one of the old metal dryers in the corner came this really loud bang that filled the fucking silence like a firecracker. We all jumped about a foot in the air, and those of us that were sat on the other old dryers slid off them immediately. All our gazes were now staring deeply into the dark corner. Bang! It echoed through the room. Bang! Bang! Whatever it was banging on all the old dryers in a row. It was as if something was jumping across them all and making its way towards us. We didn't stick around to find out if something was making its way towards us, and as a unit, we all ran as fast as we could out of the dryer room, a dozen school kids barreling down a deserted corridor. We were flinging ourselves down the old metal steps, clearing 4 at a time, and came to a halt about 3 floors up, absolutely knackered. A few of my friends leant against an old metal door that led to the lift back in the day. It was non-functional now, and the lift had been fully removed and the doors sealed shut. Knowing this made what happened next seem that bit more terrifying. The metal doors suddenly began to bang violently, so violently that my mates' heads flung forward. We all stood up to see, and the door was banging and moving and rattling. There was no way any real person could be behind that door, especially whilst it was being banged with that much force. We ran down the other flights of stairs and regrouped at my house. I'd always heard the stories of the mill being haunted, and I guess that they weren't just stories after all. Just as a narrator's note, this story's set in the same mill as the previous one, but it's told by another friend, and it also contains a brief reference to animal abuse. So, there's this mill near where I used to live, and it used to have this huge chimney that reached up to the sky, and a small block of disused offices that were attached to the chimney. One day, a small group of us decided to break into the chimney area and have a look around. This decision was made out of pure boredom, as there was nothing to do near where we lived. We managed to find our way in through a broken door and were met with a glorious sight that any urbex enthusiast would probably come at. There was the huge chimney that reached way up, so far up it was just blackness, and an old rusty spiral staircase leading up to the void. Unfortunately, the staircase was broken in parts and there was no way up, so we walked through into the old offices. There were old desks and chairs that had stood the test of time, and there was about an inch of dust layered thick across everything. One of my mates began walking down a flight of stairs into what appeared to be a basement area, and we all followed him into the subterranean abyss. It was pitch black down there, and a disgusting stench punched the air. One of my friends had a lighter with him and lit it so we could all see. Unfortunately, it was too late, as one of my other mates stood in something that made a noise like a puddle and a wet fart at the same time. He pointed his lighter down to see a dead husk of an animal. It was all swollen and bruised, pus was leaking out of pores, and its limp, lifeless body seemed to be melting into the floor. And I was crestfallen to discover that it was a dog. I thought it may have been a fox or a badger, which is sad, but to have realised it was a dog, one that had perhaps gone missing and got stuck and had a family waiting for it, or that some sick fuck had lured it there to kill it, makes me sick either way. For some reason, probably because we were kids and thought we'd all get in trouble, we ran the fuck out of there and didn't look back. For about a week. Me and all my friends had pets, and even at that young age, we couldn't bear to leave that little dog to decay there. We went back, kitted out in bin bags, wearing gloves and with litter pickers, and it's disgusting to say, but scooped this poor creature into a bin bag. We took it into the local woods and gave it a proper burial, marked only by a big tree. It's weird looking back now. Being an adult, I'd probably attempt to seek out the owner, but that seems silly given the unidentifiable state the dog was in. We were never the best behaved kids in the world, but I feel like we gave that dog some justice, and I hope the little fella is now at peace. So basically, back when I was a young teenager, there was this pub near my house. It had served the local factory workers for decades, but once the factory closed, the pub's popularity began to diminish. As I remember, the pub had been closed about 4 or 5 years around the time this happened, and it mainly happened to a few kids that I knew, so let me apologise beforehand as a few of the details may be a bit sketchy. The pub had this outhouse that served as a changing room or storage area or something like that, and after closing, this outhouse basically became a haven for the neighbourhood kids who would often sneak in to do seances and mess about with ouija boards. I myself am a bit superstitious, so I never did, as I was, to be honest, scared of the consequences. The outhouse was a go-to spot as the old pub was still alarmed and the outhouse wasn't, so kids could easily get in and out without being caught. The pub had a reputation of being haunted since closing. It was about a year before any neighbourhood kids broke into the outhouse, and when they did, they claimed they found the walls plastered with newspaper articles regarding kidnappings and murders from all over the UK and swastikas drawn all over the floors. That decor remained for the following years apparently, adding massively to the creep factor for everyone and anyone who visited. One night, anyway, a group of older kids, aged about 16 or 17, broke in with a Ouija board and were asking questions. I don't know exactly what was asked, but apparently they were pushing for answers about the newspaper clippings on the wall. I'm told that after this, the board spelled out the word burns, or burn, or something similar, and at first they all thought it was a name of someone. Before they could ask any more though, they said they began to smell a smouldering smell and hear the sound of flames crackling. They turned to see the newspapers, and they had begun to ignite from some unknown force, and they all escaped fearing for their lives. After the fire died down, it was only internal thankfully, they stupidly all re-entered and they told me that across all the walls of the outhouse, the newspaper clippings had burnt and were nothing but ash on the floor, and they claimed that in the centre of one wall was a picture of a killer from the 60s or 70s. And if I'm being totally honest, I forgot his name, but I did know it at the time and I don't really care to find out again. They said every other bit of newspaper had burnt away, except that bit. Obviously, I didn't believe them and thought that they had probably set the fire themselves, being the fucking wankers they were. And I decided a couple of days later I'd go in with a few friends, and we did. We climbed the barbed wire fence and entered the outhouse. I was shocked to see a thick layer of ash covering the floor and no newspapers on the now charred walls of the old outhouse. I was even more shocked when I glanced at the back wall and saw the picture of this killer. Even around his picture was brown and charred, yet the picture itself remained untouched. Me and my friends instantly got the creeps. Still, to this day, I claim that it could have been those older kids, but the older kids couldn't have faked what happened next. And we were all leaving, having quenched our need for the creeps, when it sounded like someone was walking behind us. There was a moment of blind panic where we all bolted out of the door in one hurried mass and closed it behind us. I was leant against the door and it sounded like someone was pushing it. Sounded. There was no force of pressure, no need for me to strain, but there was an unmistakable sound of breath and beating hands pushing against a cold steel door. I said on 3, and when I got to 3, we all ran across the garden and scuttled over the barbed wire fence. We made a deal not to tell the older kids about what had happened for fear they had, somehow, pranked us. But they never asked, like they would have if it had been set up and they were expecting us to tell them something had happened. The pub has since been reopened, but the outhouse was razed to the ground during improvements. As I'm aware, the land the outhouse was built on could still be haunted. Hi guys, it's James here from Brothers Jackson. Really hope you enjoyed that video. There were 8 true scary stories submitted to me by my friends. One of them was submitted by Wolfpack Survival. As you all know, he's always helping me out, so make sure you go and check him out. There's a link in the description to his channel. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell notification for more videos that will be coming soon. And if you've got any ideas for any content you want in the future, do let me know. I am thinking about branching out into maybe more like creepypastas or like sci-fi and fantasy narrations or anything like that. So if you want to see anything like that, do comment below. I'm also looking at maybe doing some like mini documentary type stuff and things like that. So don't forget to comment if there's anything that you would like to see, and like the video. Thanks guys.